Do you know what you all look like from the podium? It's a thing of beauty to see this day happen. We'll hear more about all the fantastic people sitting out there who helped put this together. We call it our third annual, but we're not quite sure. We have to consult with our experts who hold the purse strings over here about the future. But I tell you, there was no question of the importance and the saliency of this particular topic and the importance of making this accessible to every one of you. And to see the interest, the turnout, the commitment is just extraordinary. So I'm Jerlina Griffin-Dest. I work at the UC Office of the President and work with Brad. I don't know if Brad is in the room. Brad Buckman, are you in the room? As part of Office of the President's centralized coordinating role with student mental health. So it's a pleasure to be here in front of you once again to welcome you and to get the program going. But I want to start by asking, who are our California Community College participants? Will you please stand? Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. We are indeed one public California family. What about Cal State University? You guys had a great showing at our last one as well. Is Cal State University here yet? Yes, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Now, you know we have rivalries. As much as we love our UC Power of 10 or whatever, we do have rivalries. But let me just ask, where are my Northern California UC? I want to hear you. Stand up and be heard. NorCal in the house. Y'all kind of quiet. Yeah. Now, does that mean the remaining people are Southern California? Oh, God. Okay, next time we're going to be going up to Santa Cruz or Davis, let me tell you. I think it's a location issue. But the truth of the matter is we're all here for a common purpose. And one of the things that I want you guys to start with is stand up. Stand up. Everybody stand up. And if you have your phones out, take a selfie with the person either behind you or on the side of you, and we're going to hashtag it. We're going to let everybody know in this state what we're doing today. Oh, no, we already got a hashtag. We can't do that. We have a hashtag. It's already set up. Okay. Take selfies real quick. Now what we want you to do is hashtag cultural competency. Hashtag cultural competency. Cool. Yeah, right, exactly. Now turn them off. Okay, now I'm told turn off the phones and put them away. We don't want any more texting and all of that. So this seems really loud to me. One of the things that I think for us who care about these matters and who are in spaces that can support through political support or financial support is the breadth of the representation here. There are psychiatrists and there are psychologists and there are trainees and pre-docs and postdocs and primary care physicians, because it takes the village. It takes the village for all of us to seek wellness and wholeness, and particularly in support of our students. So I'm really, really pleased that we have such a cross-section of what I call healers in the room. So thank you all for being here as well. So as I go to my seat, I do want to introduce you to my new boss, Dr. Robin Holmes Sullivan, who is one of you. So we now have a vice president of student affairs in the central office who is a psychologist, is a therapist. She ran counseling centers. So while she's been here, I know, right? Let's give it up. And while she told me this morning, I've only been here for a month, I'm like, you've got to be kidding. It's like girlfriend, old school, like I've known you forever, has been completely focused and completely supportive of this work. She's talked about your work in spaces that we've not talked about before. And so I think you'll see over the years under her leadership an elevation of the criticality of the work that you do and how it's integrated in so many other things that we do. So Robin, can you come say a few words?
Thank you. And anyone who knows Dr. Griffin Desta knows that no one is the boss of her, so let's just get that out of the way right away. So thank you. And it is indeed wonderful to be here and to be among you. And it's great to be back in California. About 25 years ago now, I think, I was completing my pre-doctoral internship at UC Davis. We have Davis in the house, right? Yep. And as Jolena mentioned, I spent about 14 years at the Counseling Center at the University of Oregon, and then another 10 years as the Vice President for Student Life there. So I do know your work, and I appreciate your work, and I know how hard it is and how important it is, especially now. It seems like we say that every year, but it really does seem as though it does get more important every year. And as the UC continues its commitment to recruit and retain students that match the demographics of this state, then we need you more than ever to make sure that those students are able to be successful in every way. And so we're glad that you are all here. We appreciate UC's commitment to mental health and the importance of that. I hope you feel that as we invite you here, and we know we'll invite next year and the year after that, and that we challenge ourselves, even in those spaces where it's hard, or we might not know, we think we should know. This is the place, and hopefully this will be the space, where you can freely, with courage, explore those issues, those competencies, what you need in order to serve our students even better. So let's make sure that we make this space and this time that opportunity. So I do have the opportunity to thank and to let you know about who actually made this possible. I want to start with acknowledging your own campus leadership. And maybe we could have, if there are counseling center or student health center directors or executive directors here, can you please stand for a second so we can give you a round of applause? Thank you. You can sit down. It's through your leadership and your focus that has really made this possible, and we want to thank you for all of your hard work. We also want to thank the sponsors of this event. We started this, and I'm saying we in that royal we way because I wasn't here yet. So Julina and her team and Dr. Parham and others started this with $0. There were no dollars in order to bring all of you here and to bring the wonderful speakers that we have. And people started knocking on doors, and it was not hard at all for us to get several major contributors of $15,000 or more each. The Office of the President Risk Services were major contributors. The Office of the President Ethics, Compliance, and Audit Services, also major contributors. And the Office of the President Student Health. And so we really want to thank those sponsors that made this possible. We also received other donations from Jolina's office, the Office of the President Student Services, all the vice chancellors of student affairs on all 10 of the campuses. They're all in on this as well, and they made donations. All the student health center directors of the 10 campuses made donations, as well as the counseling centers of Irvine, San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. And so, again, we want to give them a round of applause for making this possible. So again, this time is for all of us, and I know that this will be a very great time for you to meet people, to increase your skills, and to recommit to this important work that we all do, and I look forward to talking with all of you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. First of all, I want to when I reflect back on the person that's coming to the mic. You know how you don't want to take credit for, I'm taking credit. I'm just letting you know. I am unabashedly taking credit for Taisha Caldwell because I'm doing my own thing. Give me my flowers while I am alive, okay? Because I had a search process. I'm using I words, not we and teams. I had a search process. I'm kind of kidding, but not quite. No, but I had a search process where I needed to have somebody direct this $7 million grant, as many of you know, we received from the Student Mental Health Services Authority in Sacramento. And, sometimes it's important to know what you are not good at. And I was at that cusp where I was like, I don't quite understand the generation that's coming in. Now, we've been in student affairs for a long time and have an opportunity to see every class, And at some point you wake up and you go, I don't recognize the students anymore. It happens gradually. And you have to go back and get trained, and you have to understand their lingo. So I knew enough to know that I didn't have that competency. I needed someone who had enough experience in the subject matter, so they had to be a mental health professional, but also had a leg into like our student world, right? And that person came to me from Dr. Taisha Caldwell, who had finished her degree at Spelman and had gone on to get her PhD in counseling in Illinois. And like all good things, we try to steal from Irvine. She was Irvine has a really great, robust counseling pre-doc program or internship program. Yay, I hear you. And she was doing that, and it was like the perfect person to come to the central office and lead our programmatic campaign. And many of you have had the opportunity to work with Taisha. You know how interpersonally effective she is, how smart she is. And if any one of you out there even think about trying to steal her, we're going to have a problem. So Taisha, come on up.
Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And with that being said, I want to acknowledge that all of the work that I do that's done at OP around mental health is done because we have such great support at the top. And our executive leaders. And I want to acknowledge my boss, Sterlina Griffin-Desta, and Dr. Robin Holmes Sullivan, who, when I come and say, can we do this? Can we try that? They say yes. And so none of this could happen without their leadership. And so I just want to acknowledge them and all the work that they do and support they provide for mental health. So if we can give them a round of applause. I also want to acknowledge our conference planning committee. So I had the honor to chair this conference, but I had a great team of volunteers who stepped up from all of our campuses and said that they would help and they would meet with me even though they're really busy in between clients. I asked them to give up their lunch hour once a week to meet with me for conference calls, to come in early. They're volunteering throughout this conference, and it's all of their ideas and vision and passion that you see reflected in the program today. And if I could ask them all to stand up, they're in the front row. I just really want you to be acknowledged. Thank you. All right, so with that, I just want to cover some logistics, and we're a little behind, so I'm going to talk really fast. I tried to make it 10, but I have 11 things, okay? Well, actually, one you already covered. So we're cultural competence. So please take pictures, tweet about your experiences in the sessions over the next 2 days, and use our hashtag on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that. Make sure you look good in your pictures. Also, so number 2, we have massage chairs in the foyer. So if you went out the doors to my right, we have 2 massage chairs set up, so please take a little time to take care of yourself and get your back rubbed while you're here. Masseuses will be there today, all day today, and until 1:30 tomorrow. You can go and sign up for a time so you don't have to wait around and check back in. Also, we're recording several of our sessions so we can archive what it is that we're doing, and we'll be putting those recordings online. So probably sometime early January, we'll have them up. And if you are registered, I'll send an email to the group and let you know that the recordings are available. So at the end of the conference, don't forget to fill out your conference evaluations. If you're going to leave early, we have the evaluations at the registration desk, so you can go ahead and pick them up early and fill that out. Parking. So for those of you that drove here, valet is the only parking at the hotel. It's been discounted from $32 to $18 a day. All you have to do is tell the staff that you're with the UC Mental Health Conference. So there's no tickets or anything, and you get your discount. Okay, number 6, getting through this. The front desk is holding luggage, so for those of you who weren't able to check in, we have a designated space to hold your luggage. When you check out tomorrow, they will also hold your luggage for the rest of the day, since we'll be here hopefully till 4 to our closing. Continuing education. So, as you know, we are really excited to be able to offer continuing education credits for our medical providers as well as our psychologists, LCSWs, and MFTs. So psychiatrists, primary care physicians, and nurse practitioners, you're approved for 11 and a half hours for the conference, but you need to sign in both days. So you don't have to sign out, but today you signed in. Tomorrow when you come back, please go back to the registration desk and sign your name in again so you get credit for both days. And that's pretty simple. And make sure you do evaluations at the end and at your sessions. For psychologists, LCSWs, and MFTs, we have tables in the back of all of the rooms that are accredited. You can wave. We have Dr. Diaz back there, and yes, all my Irvine people. Shout out to Irvine. So when you go into the sessions that are accredited, and you know that by the asterisk marked in the program, you need to sign in at the registration table with your little sticker, put your sticker on, sign your name, and you need to sign out, put your sticker on, sign your name. So Irvine tried to make it easy by giving you stickers. So don't forget to do that. I want you to get your credit. You're approved for up to 7 hours, and those hours are indicated in the program. Okay. I'll also have a note. So we have someone that lost their cell phone. So if you find an iPhone, can you please take it to the registration desk and leave it there? And hopefully we can make this a better day for our attendee who lost their iPhone. Okay, so 2 more things. So we have our wellness raffle. So everyone got their $100 bill when they registered? Yes? Okay, so make sure you put your name and your campus or organization on the raffle ticket. Drop your ticket into the bucket at registration. We're doing drawings at the networking reception tonight and tomorrow at the closing session. We have some great prizes, gift cards, and a lot of our counseling centers donated some extra special prizes, so you don't want to miss that. Okay, and then also to note in your program, you have dinner recommendations on page 20. All of those restaurants are located in Fashion Island, which is just about 5 minutes away. We learned last night that the shuttles from the hotel actually stop running at 6, so we thought we'd be able to shuttle everyone there, but that's not going to happen. But they're happy to help you. Just arrange an Uber is the recommendation, and it should just cost you a few dollars to go there and come back for dinner. Or you're welcome to eat here in the hotel. They're prepared to host us all if everyone wanted to stay. Okay, and then just don't forget, don't miss the closing ceremony. It's going to be led by a couple of our counseling center directors, and we're going to have a special performance of West African music and drumming, and you don't want to miss it. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Griffin Desta. Thank you.
So one of the things I get to do in my job at the Office of the President is to work very closely and staff the Council of Vice Chancellors for Student Affairs that's led by the 2 folks here on my left. Over the past couple of years, I think, Thomas, this is your last year as chairing the council. So I'll just say a little bit about how critical it has been to have Thomas himself as a psychologist chair both the Student Mental Health Oversight Committee and the Council of Chancellors. So it's no wonder today was possible because of the level of advocacy and support that he continuously gives to this topic in all the places and spaces that he has. Thomas keeps us honest. He keeps us ethically and morally centered. And he keeps us in such great mood and space and keeps us excited about this work. And it's been such a pleasure for me to be a part of his life as well as to work very closely with him to deliver on all of our promises that we have to our students and to ourselves. So Thomas, can you come and say a few words and introduce our speaker?
Let me say good morning. Well, let me try that again. I heard UC, CSU, and community colleges were in the house. Good morning. Good morning. It's been a while since we last met, right, up in Los Angeles, yes? Who was there at our last conference? Now, it's your feedback that said we got to do this again that has actually prompted us to be able to do that. So we're glad to have you back. And we want to welcome you to this particular space in the Fairmont Hotel in Newport Beach. I want to begin my remarks real briefly by saying that I've had the honor and privilege of leading both the Student Affairs Vice Chancellor's Council, 4 or 5 committees at OP, but this one has been one of the favorites I do in student mental health. But what you're always clear about, if you have any kind of leadership role, is that a leader is only good as the work produced by the people who work with them. And so, irrespective of vision you provide and things you lay out, our work would really be nothing without the support of our colleagues at the Office of the President, without these 2 sisters right here. So Jerlina is just wonderful and magnificent. Taisha is wonderful and magnificent. Dr. Holmes, I've been knowing for how long we've been knowing each other? Like forever, right? So we knew each other as counseling center directors way back in the day. So to have her actually back in this role is phenomenal as well. And for all the counseling center directors, the mental health center committee, the committee who put this together, those are the people who really deserve all the credit. What we've done is provided strategic vision. What they've done is really the groundwork to make all this happen. And so before I go any further, I want us to give them a rousing round of applause and say thank you for bringing us to this space. Oh, we can do better than that. Give it up for these folks. I recall somewhere reading. I know this ain't even my workshop yet. They talked me into doing a workshop later on too, so I'm going to do a Building for Eternity piece right after this. But the iconic African-American poet Langston Hughes reminds us to hold fast to dreams, for if they die, life is just a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. I want you to put that image in your head. Hold fast to dreams, for if they die, life is just a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Within the mental health profession that we all represent, we mend many broken wings. We help people heal in the broken places. We help to restore the dreams of life's possibility and potential that take flight amid the challenges and adversities in life. That is what we do. And that is what we do with passion. And yet, all the training we represent, the brilliance, the skill, and even all that passion, in the absence of cultural competence, is an unfulfilled potential that needs to be better realized. We have arrived at this space for this 2016 UC Mental Health Cultural Competency Summit with the theme of Better Together, Culturally Mindful Practices, in order to help us fulfill our own potential. The great Algerian psychiatrist Frantz Fanon said there were 3 critical questions everybody should be able to ask and answer. And he was talking to people of African descent, but I think whether you are white, black, blue, brown, or purple, it applies. Question 1 was, who am I? Question 2 is, am I who I say I am? Question 3 is, am I all I ought to be? We are not just psychiatrists and psychologists and physicians and social workers and marriage and family therapists, etc. We are healers. Who are we? We are healers. But every now and then, even healers have to be healed. We spend lots of time taking care of everybody else, yes? And are very good at neglecting ourselves. Somebody know what I'm talking about this morning, yes? So this is about self-care. This is about for you. This is about allowing you to lay your burden down for just 2 days and say, I'm going to go take care of me. That was our goal in putting this summit together. When I took over chairship of the UC Mental Health Committee, and I served on the committee forever since its inception, I guess. So it was the original committee, then it was the oversight committee, and then under the capable leadership back then of Vice Chancellor Michael Young and Joel Dimsdale, who did phenomenal things with it. But what we said when I took over is that we were not going to be a committee who simply sat and met and discussed and then moved on and passed the baton over to the next person. We were going to do some work, and we set some ambitious goals. The first goal, as we remind you, is that we would reinforce the reciprocal nature of mental health and the academic enterprise. You cannot have academic excellence in our institutions and not have mental health and wellness. And I've tried to be as bold as I can be in declaring that to all who would listen, reminding people that success in one domain does facilitate success in the other. 2, I said we would advocate and continue to advocate for more resources so that our mental health centers and professionals will need to engage the important work that they do. Now, I don't want to make our community college or CSU college envious, but if you notice smiles on the directors' faces of some of the UC colleagues, it is because they have seen probably the biggest infusion of resources in my lifetime in UC to hire mental health professionals. And it was so dramatic that we decided not to piecemeal it in OP and the Regents Infinite Wisdom. They said, we're not going to give you kind of 2 a year for 5 years. We're going to front load it, give everybody a loan, find some money, do whatever, and we're going to hire all 10 of them today. And everybody's gotten this massive infusion of folk there. We advocated for those resources. And that is unprecedented at a time when the state is disinvesting in public higher education. Our academic spaces, right, are looking for more resources, but student affairs and mental health is growing, not shrinking. We need to recognize what a blessing that is. Third, what I said is we would be clear about trying to lead the charge to deprivatize and publicize issues that our clients bring with them into our clinical spaces. For clients who are depressed, who feel anxious, when you are assaulted, when you are berated, when you are discriminated against, it makes sense to come in with the clinical symptoms that they do. But I've argued numerous times, both in verbiage and my writing, that if we can help people to be less depressed, less anxious, less guilty, and help them to move to some level of health and wholeness and healing, all we've really done is help them to be more mentally healthy and then sent them back out into an environment still vulnerable to the same social pathology that wound them up in our office in the first place. That has to stop today. So we said we would lead the charge to publicize and deprivatize some of those issues. Fourth, we wanted to help us all to become more aware of best practices. Why do we create these conferences? Because there is so much doggone talent and potential among all of you. What we don't want you to do is be the best kept secret on your campus, in your center, in your agency. We want you to be able to come together and share some of that information with your colleagues so that we can all benefit and grow as a family. And who ultimately benefits are the clients we are committed to train and help and restore some level of wholeness and to heal. So, given that ambitious agenda, in just a couple year span, look at what we've been doing. And let me try to move through these pretty quickly. We've gotten 50% earmarks of the 5% student fee increase for mental health that has led to the hiring of not 10, not 20, not 30, not 40, 50, 60, 70, but 85 plus clinicians across the UC system. I've been pushing on some of our counseling center directors and student health folks, so I thank them for allowing me to kind of push them to improve data collection procedures and standardization of mental health records across the system, that has led to our ability to track trends over time and compare our data nationally with other folk. We formalized our procedures for providing mutual aid across campuses in times of emergency. And we relied on our colleagues at different campuses, and you see, who've had to learn those lessons the hard way, who've had to deal with crisis and tragedy and accept the mutual aid that was coming. But we've learned from that and tried to now more formalize that. We are, in fact, releasing a series of publications. The first was the Mental Health Handbook for faculty and staff. If you haven't seen it, it is a magnificent document that even all of our chancellors on campuses are raving about. If our CSU or community college colleagues haven't seen it, please make sure you catch Taisha something and have her send you a copy of something like this. It is phenomenal. We're about to release a white paper, which posits that we have an obligation to research and respond appropriately to the environmental causes of distress in our students. It doesn't do us any good to put a whole bunch of new clinicians on the ground and the social pathology is still running rampant on our campuses. We have to be able to do an environmental scan, not just an individual one. The etiology of client distress is very different. We're vetting new promising technologies. We're tackling difficult discussions around issues like shared therapy records and the university's response to incidents of hate and discrimination. And we are continually looking for new funding streams and grants to support this work. This is the work of this committee in a very less than 2 years. So we on the move. Are y'all feeling it like we're working? Y'all feeling it? So today is simply a fulfillment of that piece where we said we're going to share best practices. This is an investment in you. Your job today, right? Untether yourself. I'm going to try to do the same thing, even though it's hard for vice chancellors to do this. I'm going to try to untether myself from the cell phone while I'm here and just be. And just be. But while we be, we have to always be in a state of becoming more better. That's what cultural competency is about. It's about recognizing that I be in the moment, but while I be, I'm always in a state of becoming. Good today, but better tomorrow, and better than that the next day. It's always about growth and potential. That's what we want to be able to do. Y'all with me on that? Everybody with me on that? Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing somebody who I had to call on. I had to reach deep into the reservoir of talent across the country, all the way across the country, to find somebody. And actually, it ended up being a little easier than I thought because it was an invitation to come back home. So I want to introduce you to our keynote speaker, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, not just for his intellect and his scholarship, but really his passion. Even as a student, he was a leader. As a student, he was an advocate. As a student, he was uncompromising in his clarity about who he was. The great psychologist Joe White used to teach us as students at Irvine that you cannot seek validation from your oppressor. That philosophy, that theme really resonates with me with our keynote speaker because he never looked to validation from folk who would oppress him as he tried to crystallize and articulate his own sense of identity. How many of us worry too much about what other people think? Yes? Right? That's part of the distress we have. The way I've tried to live my life, what I admire about our keynote speaker is the problem is not that people have an opinion. The problem is that we give a damn about what people think about that opinion in the first place. That's part of the problem. He's been uncompromising in his clarity about that. He's an award-winning scholar, activist, received his doctorate degree in counseling psych from Columbia University, studied with one of my good friends, Darrell Sue. He's one of the leading researchers in understanding the impact of microaggressions on mental health and physical health of people of color, particularly for LGBTQ people and other marginalized groups. Self-proclaimed California-bred New Yorker. He once won an argument with Bill O'Reilly on Fox News Channel, the O'Reilly Factor. Any of y'all see Kevin on there, by the way? Going to town with Bill O'Reilly? was named one of People magazine's hottest bachelors in 2006. That was 2006. This is 2016. A lot happening since then, right? A couple times since then, right? Hold on a minute while I get my time. He's been featured in New York Times, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, PBS, History Channel, HGTV, Philippine News, just to name a few. He's published over 90 works on multicultural issues in the fields of psychology and education. He's authored not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 books, including Filipino American Psychology, actually it's one of my favorites, a handbook of theory, research, and clinical practice, and the text, That's So Gay, Microaggressions in the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community. In 2014, he launched the series Out Talk with Dr. Kevin Nadal, which airs on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network in New York City. The show is committed to discussing issues that are often difficult for people to talk about, providing safe space for people just to bring out those issues, including things like systemic racism, heterosexism, models, minority myth, and the disparities in criminal justice system. Currently, he serves as a professor of psychology at both John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. He's executive director of CLAGS, which is the Center for LGBTQ Studies at CUNY, and the president of the Asian American Psychological Association. By the way, the first openly gay person to serve in this role, right, within that. Within the Asian American Psych Association, he co-founded the Division on Filipino Americans in 2010 and the Division of LGBTQ issues in 2012. So you see his advocacy didn't stop because he came out of the Eden Nation. His advocacy continued and just got, right, more profound, right, the older and more experience he got. He's the CEO of Nadal and Associates, his consulting firm, which has allowed him to facilitate training and workshops with corporations, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, and even cultural competency conferences within the University of California. In his address today, he'll talk about trumping hate, how mental health practitioners can advocate for social justice. Oh, I don't think you heard me. He's going to talk about trumping hate, right? Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our friend. I'm so proud of one of our students, Dr. Kevin Nadal.
Thank you so much to Dr. Parham. I'm going to set my timer because otherwise I'll just talk to you for days, which could be an all right thing. But I also want to say that I'm really honored and thankful to be here, and I'm a little mad at you, Dr. P, for making me teary-eyed because I have makeup on and messes me up. I also want to acknowledge that it really feels good to be here and to come home. I went to UC Irvine. Any anteaters in the house? All right. Do we do like zot, 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 or something like that? All right. And it feels really good to come home also because I do believe the first time I ever heard of the term cultural competency was from Dr. Parham. And so I might get emotional throughout this presentation because I often have to pinch myself to wonder how I got here. I was at one point an 18-year-old kid who went to college because he thought that's what he was supposed to do. I somehow found mentors in people like Dr. Parham and Dr. Jeanette Castellanos and Dr. Joe White, people who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I often wondered why I've been given these opportunities, and I've often wondered why anyone would want to hear anything I had to say. And I'm working on that internalized depression, as I hope you all are too. So I'm really honored and thankful to be here. I'm really humbled by the words that Dr. Parham shared. Sometimes that quality of not caring what people think or telling people to their face about themselves is not a quality that people like, but it is something that I've learned to do because we only have one life, we only have one voice. And if you don't use your voice, then how will you have an opportunity to be heard? So I'm going to talk about trumping hate. Today is December of 2016. In about a month, the world will change, if it already hasn't. And I'm not going to talk about the elections, and I'm not going to talk about politics, but I'm going to talk about the meaning behind the politics on our everyday lives. For us as mental health practitioners, for us as people of historically marginalized groups, and for us as a community, that our world is changing, that the world that many of us thought was going to be a safe space for us no longer feels that safe. A world that many of us thought we could be hopeful about, knowing it wasn't fully a safe space, has become less safe. And so I want to talk about how this will affect us as mental health practitioners, not just for those of you that are doing the good work in the room with your clients, those of you who are in the classrooms with your students, but also those of you who walk these grounds, people who in your everyday life do have the access and the capacity to make change. I encourage you to keep your phones out because I want you to tweet along. So tweet along with the hashtag cultural competency because people need to know that we're here. People need to know that this is what we're talking about. And this is how we do it these days. And to combat every piece of fake news, we have to publish some real news, and that's called your Twitter feed. So please tweet along as we talk. I want to say thank you to my mentors and to everyone who has really shaped me to become the person that I am today. I thank Dr. Parham, Dr. Castellanos from UC Irvine, Dr. Joe White from UC Irvine, Dr. Alfie Breland at Michigan State University, and Dr. Gerald Wing-Soo at Columbia University, who again really pushed me to become the person that I am today. I think my colleagues and all of my chosen professional families, those from the Asian American Psychological Association, anyone here from AAPA? Yeah, all right. You don't have to be model minorities, you could scream, come on. AAPA? Anyone from Division 17? Right. Division 44? Division 45? I also like to thank some of my other homes, the LGBTQ Scholars of Color Network, CLAGS, the Center for LGBTQ Studies. Dr. Parham mentioned that I am the first openly gay president of the Asian American Psychological Association. I'm also the first openly brown, or the first executive director of color of CLAGS, the Center for LGBTQ Studies. I think that's important for us to acknowledge, not for my own vanity, although that's a little helpful, but because I think we need to recognize that intersectionalities exist and that we can no longer deny that people of color belong to the LGBTQ community, that LGBTQ people belong to communities of color, and with all these other marginalized identities that exist, and that we need to recognize the isms that happen within our own homes. I like to always thank my students and my research team and to the future generations of people that will continue to do this work when we're no longer here. I hope that you will continue to empower yourself and to learn in the same way that I did from people who came before me. And finally, I just want to give a quick shout out to the ancestors and the trailblazers, people for who I would not be here if it was not for them. I want to recognize the indigenous people whose lands we are on today, and I implore all of you to really thank people, the indigenous people, for allowing us to use this space and to honor their space and to be sacred in the usage of this land. So I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to share a little bit about my journey. I know a lot of times people might know about what people write about and presume that you're writing about things that are related to your personal life. So I'll just tell you a little bit about where I've been and where I hope to go. I'll talk a little bit about my research and how that's impacted me, as well as how I think we can use research in education as a way of advocating for social justice. And then also I want to talk about ways that I hope we all can find our voice, whether it be through education, whether it be through therapy, or even through your voice through the media and social media. So who am I? This is who I am. This is me as probably a 5-year-old. I like to call this my easy breezy beautiful 5-year-old picture. When I came out to my parents 20 years later or so, my parents said, "I had no idea you were gay." And I said, "Really, Mom?" I used to watch a lot of Star Search and practice my spokesmodeling. I used to watch Solid Gold and pretend that I can be a solid gold dancer. These were the types of things that I liked to do. I grew up in an immigrant family. My parents immigrated from the Philippines in 1965, the year that Asian Americans were allowed to enter the United States without there being a quota. My parents were the first in their families to leave their hometowns in rural Philippines. They came to the United States with college educations and suitcases full of dreams. My parents didn't have training on what it meant to be American. They just kind of came here, not knowing what to expect. They were told that there would be opportunities for them. They were told that they would be welcome to the United States. They were told that this was going to be a place that they could thrive. However, they were met with racism, they were met with discrimination, and they were taught in indirect and direct ways that they had to change who they were in order for that American dream to come true. Growing up as a child of immigrants meant being bicultural, meaning that I had to learn what it meant to be Filipino in the home and what it meant to be American outside of the home. Being bicultural and being Filipino-American meant knowing all about the latest American fads, watching TV shows like Growing Pains and The Cosby Show. We were allowed to watch it back then. But it also meant knowing Filipino core values, knowing about collectivism, knowing about kapwa, which is the idea of the connected spirit to other Filipinos, knowing about utang ng loob, which is known as the debt of reciprocity, putting your family and your loved ones before yourself. I went to school, and I often got made fun of for those very things that felt so natural and normal for me. I would bring my mom's chicken adobo to school in Tupperware that I always had to bring home because you can't throw away Tupperware, while my classmates ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I remember the first time I told my mom I didn't want to bring Filipino food to school anymore, and it looked like she wanted to cry. And I, not knowing that there were other ways of being, forced her to make me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I say all these things because I think it's important for us to recognize that if you belong to majority groups, you belong to the group that dictates what the narrative is of what is normalized and what is not. And so being a child of immigrant family, I did not know that I was allowed to celebrate who I was. I did not know that to be Filipino was to be excellent. I did not know that to be Asian American meant to be beautiful. I saw blonde hair and blue eyes on television. I saw people hugging their parents and thinking that that's what parents were supposed to be, and my parents hug me once a year. And this is what we're talking about when we're referring to cultural competency, is understanding that your way of being and your worldview and your experience may or may not match what others are, and to recognize how power and privilege influence those experiences and those perspectives, and to empathize with others that have unique experiences, and to encourage them to thrive and to celebrate those differences. I also grew up as the youngest of 3 boys. As the youngest of 3 boys, we were encouraged to like a lot of different traditionally masculine things. We played all sorts of sports, basketball, baseball. In this photo, you see that I'm smiling, but I'm really crying inside because I didn't like sports. I did not want to play on teams related to basketball or baseball. I really liked the arts. I like to do things like dancing, which I usually have a photo of, but I guess I don't have it. I like to do jazz and tap and sing in choirs. But that was discouraged, not from my parents, oddly enough, but by my classmates. And because I wanted to avoid being different, that because I wanted to not stand out, and because I did not want to be bullied, I had to stop it. I made sure that I did not stand out in any way so that people could not have any reason to target me. It was already hard enough being different because of my skin that I did not want anyone else to have any other reason because of my sexual orientation, or at the time, all I thought of was because I thought that boys were cute. I didn't have the language to know that this is what I was doing, but somehow I learned it. Somehow I learned that being gay or being queer is bad, and that to be heterosexual is the norm. Somehow I learned that to be feminine and a boy is bad, and that to be masculine and a boy is good. Sometimes these were taught more directly, sometimes these were taught more indirectly, but those were the messages that I, as a 6-year-old boy, learned and continue to learn for the first few decades of my life. Now just think about that. Think about what that does to a child's psyche, to know that at 6 years old, that there's something wrong with you, that at 6 years old, you are not allowed to be who you are, that at 6 years old, that to be who you are meant to be punished and to feel bad about yourself. Now, when we talk about LGBTQ kids, we hear about things like suicide and depression and substance use and kids running away from home. And a lot of times that's pathologized. But in reality, maybe we should change the narrative. Maybe that's not pathology at all, but rather that's them coping as best as they can. That's them coping in a world that tells them they should not exist. So as I continued through high school, I learned a lot more about my identity. I had a lot of Filipino-American friends. My high school was 50% Filipino-American. I became very close with other friends of color, particularly people of African descent and Latino, Latinx people. And around this time is when I started to realize that I was different, that being a person of color meant that people viewed you differently than they viewed white people. It meant learning that you had to be hypervigilant when you were in certain places, that when you were around police officers, that you had to change your mannerisms and how they perceived you, or in order to control how they perceived you, or at least do your best to control how they perceived you. It meant sometimes having to fight with teachers who might have stereotyped you, but yet who would never say anything explicitly racist to you. So now imagine a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old who knows that perhaps there's something wrong with how people are treating them, perhaps realizes that there are stereotypes that are being made of them. How are they supposed to cope with that? We see that a lot of times people of color learn that they're not good enough to do something, don't feel capable of doing something, don't feel capable that they can do something, feel that they're not smart enough, that they're not that much of a leader, that they're not good enough to thrive. And if they don't have the parents or the support networks or the teachers or the mentors to tell them that they are, why wouldn't they think that? When they turn on the television, or these days turn on social media and see that people of color, particularly black people and black men, are being killed for no reason, and that people are justifying the reasons why they were killed, if only he didn't blank, he would be alive. If only he knew how to talk to police officers, he'd be alive. If only he didn't have a gun, he would be alive. We know that's not true. We have just seen this past week the case of Dylan Roof a name that I hate saying because I don't love that I know his name. But a young white man who killed a church in the South of innocent black churchgoers. And yet when he was arrested, he got taken to Burger King. Where's his if only? Maybe if only he was black, things would have been different. My trajectory is such that I struggled with intersectional identities, knowing what it meant to be a person of color, a Filipino American, an Asian American, also knowing what it meant to be a gay person, a queer person, part of the LGBTQ community. And in doing so, sometimes it feels really lonely that we don't often have mentors or role models who fit both of those categories. That because of racism within the LGBTQ community, we might not see as many LGBTQ people of color in visible roles. When you think about the media and you think about popular LGBTQ celebrities, how many people of color can you name? And then, conversely, when we think about communities of color, how might homophobia and transphobia still negatively impact queer and trans people's abilities to feel connected to their communities? And when we think about within communities of color, how often do you see leaders who identify as queer or transgender? And why are they not able to thrive in those spaces? So I think it's important for all of us to also acknowledge how our own communities need to do some work ourselves, while also not allowing white heterosexual people to blame us for all of their problems. I found love, I found a man. In 2014, we got married. He likes to tell me that I'm the second luckiest man alive because he's the luckiest man. No, he tells me the opposite. He says that he's the second luckiest man alive, that I'm the luckiest man alive. And to know that although we got married and this is something that we wanted to do, that marriage didn't solve homophobia or transphobia. In fact, marriage and marriage equality may have even made transphobia worse because people are fighting so much for marriage equality that they forgot to also fight for things that affect transgender people. To know that transgender people are still being killed at astronomically horrifying rates each year. That this year, I think this is the newest number, that 23 transgender women have been killed in the United States, and that most of them are transgender or were transgender women of color. Why aren't we talking about that? So this is something that we need to talk about. The personal is political. Our marriage is personal, it was a lovely ceremony, but it's also political, that it's a reminder that we have so much work that we need to do in our communities that we can stop and celebrate, but also recognize that the work is not done. My journey has also allowed me to have a lot of different professional opportunities. This is me at the White House at the end of October. I share this picture not to boast, because I want to tell you about where I am right at this space and time. Today is December. This was late October. In late October, I was feeling good. In late October, I was like, I got invited to the White House. In late October, I was like, my president is black. My next president will be a white woman, and I'm okay with that. And then, it got even better. In late October, I was notified that I was promoted to full professor. Thank you. And again, I say this not to boast, but rather to recognize that it can be done. I remember telling people when I was an 18-year-old kid, they said, what do you want to do for school? And I said, I don't know, just want to graduate. That's what I'm supposed to do, right? And I remember taking psychology because I like psychology. And I took a psychology class one time in high school, and it was an elective. It was taught by our gym teacher, so I'm sure he was very qualified. But I liked it. It was cool. I got into UCI, I started taking my intro to psych classes, and they were hard. They were hard because I was that high school student who never had to work and got A's. And then I got to college, and you need me to actually read? I can't just open my book the day before the test. I have to actually go to class. When I was a freshman, I was put on academic probation. And I share that because it's real, but two, because I'm sure some of y'all are in academic probation too. And I want to normalize that experience. So when you have a system of any sort that tells you that you are metaphorically on academic probation, to know that yes, that's a wake-up call, yes, it's shameful, yes, it's distressing, but it also can help you to realize that if I really want this, then I need to work hard for it. It wasn't until my junior year that I really liked taking psychology classes, and the reason why is because UC Irvine offers a breadth of courses on multicultural psychology. So I took Asian American psychology, Chicano Latino psychology, and African psychology with Dr. Parham. I don't think I did too well in Dr. Parham's class. His tests were hard. But I learned so much from all of those classes. Dr. Parham is the first professor of color I ever had in psychology. And I remember seeing him in front of the classroom and thinking, wow, this is possible. I thought that we just got educated by white people all the time, all day, every day, and that was just how life was. My high school was 50% Filipino, 25% Latino, and all of our teachers but one were white. I really just thought that that's what it was. So to see professors of color, to see psychologists of color, know that your existence is revolutionary. Your very being and being visible can change someone's life. When a student goes to the College Counseling Center or the University Health Center and they request to see a therapist or a staff psychologist and they see your face, just your face alone can open up so many ideas, can represent so much to them of their possibilities. I also share that I became full professor because I need to acknowledge that this is still a problem. We should not have to celebrate as much that's when people of color become full professors. We need that to be a norm. A study that came out on Filipino American professors a few years ago found that within the social sciences and in education and in humanities, that there are only 16 Filipino American full professors. 16. There are probably 16 Filipinos in this room. But in the entire country, in those fields, only 16 full professors. So I share this because I want people to know that it's possible. This was late October of 2016. I was on cloud 9. I thought, great, my work is over. I don't have to do anything anymore. I'm so just relieved. I got full professor. I did it in a young age, at a young age. I thought it was over. In fact, on November 8th, I went to see my nephews and nieces, or my nephew and my niece. These are beautiful Filipino, Haitian children, and they're so excited about the elections. My niece, Kayla, who's 6 years old, I said, who are you going to vote for? She says, I'm going to vote for Hillary. I said, why are you going to vote for Hillary? She's like, because she's a girl and she cares about kids. And I said, oh, that's great. I was like, does Donald Trump care about kids? She says, no. And then I said, you're right, he doesn't. The day after the election, I felt like America broke up with me. I felt like America not just broke up with me, but broke up with me on text. My first thought was, how am I going to talk to Kayla about this? How am I going to tell her that the person she wanted to be president, the first girl president, as she would say, our first woman president, wasn't good enough? That the country did not vote for her, at least the Electoral College, did not vote for her, despite the fact that she was the most qualified person to run for the position. What message did this send girls? Girls who are taught in every other way that you can be whatever you want to be, that you can play sports now, which is a message that's been, people have been saying the past decade or so. You can become CEOs and business people, you can enter STEM fields, become doctors and scientists. They hear this message all the time, and I think in some ways it works. We might start to see an increase of women in STEM fields. We might see an increase of women in business. But if the highest position in the land is one that is not attainable by a woman, and if the highest position in the land is one that is not attainable by an overly qualified woman in comparison to a highly underqualified man, what message does that send to our young girls? And when you have young girls with intersectional identities, young girls of color, who are already taught that there are so many other obstacles that they will face because of their race, how would it be possible for them to not develop an internalized oppression? How would it be even possible for them to not develop an imposter phenomenon? The imposter phenomenon being that women and people of color and women of color and LGBTQ people of color often feel like we're not good enough. We're not supposed to be here, that we're going to be found out. I joke with people every day that at least once a year I have that anxiety dream where you wake up and they took away your PhD. And I've heard that lots of people have similar dreams. But why is that? Because we were taught so much that maybe we weren't good enough. We were taught so much that we have to be 20 times more qualified in order to be respected, in order to have a seat at the table. So what message does it send when somebody literally has 20 times, 100 times more of the qualifications and still wasn't good enough? And then it was November 9th, and I woke up to this. I share this with you because for those of you who may have voted in a way that I did not, to recognize that this is the country we now live in, that people feel much more able to be vocal about their hate. That somebody can write confidently to me, the first one on Twitter, about me not learning from Orlando. Another person writing to me that I should kill myself with their profile picture being keep calm and kill faggots. This is a reality, and I'm just one person. We've seen that there have been so many incidents of hate through cyber, mail, and through in person. Last week, I was getting out of a cab with some friends, and one friend was going to stay in the cab. And as we got out of the cab, a white man was waiting, trying to get in the cab, but we said, no. The car is continuing. Keep in mind, the people that got out of the car was me, a Filipino man, a Filipino woman, and a South Asian man, a Pakistani man. The driver was South Asian, and the passenger remaining in the seat was Latino. Well, he still is Latino. We all still are these things. But the white passenger, well, he said, no, he's continuing on to another stop. He punched the car window, no damage, punched the car window, The South Asian driver came out to inspect, didn't even say anything to the man, just went to inspect to see if there was damage. There was no damage. And then the white potential passenger says something about Trump that was mumbled, and then he tells the taxi driver, "Your life will end soon. Your life will end soon." He screams it at the top of his lungs. This is the world we live in. So how can we trump this hate? How can we navigate this world knowing that people might feel more emboldened with their hate? Well, there are a few things that we need to recognize. One is that the hate has always been there. It was just disguised. And while most of us, many of us, will have wanted to have been hopeful that the hate was decreasing, we really need to check our realities and accept that the hate had always been there. I know that when I was first learning about ethnic studies and that sort of thing, I remember a professor once saying, I'd rather have somebody wearing a white hood than smile to my face and be racist behind closed doors, because at least with the person with the cape, I know what I'm getting. And the answer is now that you might have people that are emboldened, but there are still far too many people behind closed doors who voted for a way that may have taken away from some of your rights, or at least aimed to take away from some of your rights. To know that if you voted in a way that was opposite from me, you have your right to do so, but you also have to realize that this came with consequences. And to know that even for me, for voting for the person who I voted for, that I know that I had to accept the consequences that that came with. And that voting for the president before that knowing how much I admire and respect this man, that there were a lot of other things he did that I did not admire or respect. So for those who voted in this way, to know that we have a vice president-elect who wants to take away women's rights to health care. We have a vice president who has tried to promote conversion therapy, which is a mental health issue, because we know that the APA and all other mental health professional organizations have found these to be unethical as well as ineffectual. That even if conversion therapy worked, that it doesn't, or that even if we thought that it was okay, that it doesn't work. And that to spend money on conversion therapy instead of focusing on real issues, that might be one reason why why there was an outbreak of HIV/AIDS in Indiana, because money was pulled from HIV/AIDS research and instead put into causes like such. So I say all this because we live in a different world, but I do want to at least try to encourage you all to be hopeful. That our ancestors have gone through so much more before we are going through right now. And if they got through it, then we can get through it too. That if people had to endure violence on a daily basis, if people had to experience hostile and overt discrimination to the point that they were treated like animals, then we can get through this as well. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. I'm not going to say that it gets better, because I don't know that it gets better. In fact, I think it gets bitter, but maybe it doesn't get better. But I do know that we are all in this together. So how do we do this as psychologists, as mental health practitioners? Well, one, let me tell you about research. And Oprah, thank you for asking this question. And Oprah, you messed up your slide, girl. Like, you should have, there's a grammar error, and I just realized it when I was up here. But Oprah, how can we use teaching and research to advocate for social justice? Well, one, I want you all to think about the power of scholarship, that education can be a step, a first step to instilling change. be very clear, education is not the only step. In fact, we have to stop kidding ourselves that education alone is going to change the world. Because we had so much education going into this election, and people believed what they wanted to believe. We have empirical evidence about so many things revolving around health disparities, involving the impact of discrimination on mental health and physical health, empirical evidence on implicit bias and how implicit bias affects things like job applications and hiring people and viewing someone as capable of doing something. We have empirical evidence that police officers have biases and that these biases influence how they might react in seeing different targets. And that when the targets are people of color, particularly black men, that they're viewed as dangerous and older, versus if they're white, they're viewed as people that can be talked to, people that can be reasoned with. So education alone will not solve our problems, but it's a start. Education can be reading the great works of people of the past, so people like Audre Lorde or James Baldwin, but also the great works of people like Darrell Sue or Thomas Parham or Joe White or Patricia Arredondo or any person in our generation who advocates for social justice. Read as much as you can, because these are folks who not only have a lot to say based on their empirical research, but have a lot to say based on their lived experience. And share those works with others as well. My research has focused over the past 10 years or so on microaggressions. As I'm sure most of you are familiar with, microaggressions are these subtle forms of discrimination that impact people's lives, that they're often based on stereotypes or biases that people have of historically marginalized groups. And with microaggressions, we see that microaggressions influence things like mental health, physical health, self-esteem, even behavioral issues like substance abuse or eating disorders. And so what we really need to do is to educate more people on the impact of microaggressions. When people hear about microaggressions and they become defensive instantaneously, a common reaction is usually something like, oh, I guess it's PC, I can't say anything anymore. And the answer is, you can say what you want. This is a free country. You do have the right to share what's on your mind. But if you know that what you're saying has an impact on people's mental health, on their physical health, on how they feel about themselves and their ability to survive and thrive in this country and in the world, why would you want to continue to talk like that? Why would you want to continue to do those things, to hurt others? And why not be open to expressing yourselves or in communicating in ways and make people feel good about themselves? So microaggressions work is one way that we can at least help people to understand that the ways that they communicate with others and interact with each other has an impact on people's well-being. One of my favorite microaggressions is when people at a party, they don't know me, they say something like, so where are your wife and kids? And I say, in my parents' imagination. I've been doing more work on multicultural competence, and I thank all the trailblazers who've worked on multicultural competence for the past several decades. And then just to know that multicultural competence can take so many different forms. It's not just knowledge, awareness, and skills in the therapy room, but also understanding how to integrate multicultural competence into every aspect of your life, whether it be in staff meetings, whether it be in intake forms, whether it be in the way that the receptionist might greet the clients when they first get in, to also just understand multicultural competence on larger systems, and how can we become more multiculturally competent and inclusive. Again, not forcing people to do things because it's PC or politically correct, but rather to do these things because you want to serve people. You want people to feel included. You want people to have opportunities to survive and thrive. I've been doing a lot of work on intersectional identities. As I've mentioned before, intersectional identities are concepts that people don't necessarily talk about. We like to put our identities into certain boxes, that if the person is approaching us in therapy, that maybe we're only viewing them through one lens. But how about viewing them through all their lenses? And how about allowing them to self-identify how they choose or and to ask them what identities are most meaningful for them? This picture is a picture of the LGBTQ Scholars of Color Network. We're having a conference in April, so if you identify with any of those identities or know people who are, please ask them or encourage them to join the network, because I think there are so few of us and we need to have as much support and networking as we can. And then finally, I've been doing a lot of work on justice. One thing that I think psychologists and social scientists in general don't do enough of is recognizing how their work can influence policy. So we do a lot of work on how our research can influence therapy within the therapy room in counseling settings, but how can we advocate for justice? When we look at the criminal justice system, we see a disproportionate amount of people of color, men of color specifically, black men specifically, even more specifically. So how can we change that? We know they're not going to change themselves. So maybe we need to find ways to insert ourselves into those systems. We need to be people who hold power in these positions so that some change can be done. We can no longer be complacent. We can no longer presume that people have our best interests at heart because they don't. And so this is something that we need to do. I've been doing work on how to make criminal justice system or the justice system more inclusive of LGBTQ folks, knowing that you can't put transgender people in the gender that matches their assigned sex at birth, but rather that there need to be facilities that where they can feel safe. To also know that you can't just put them into isolation, because now putting them into solitary confinement can also increase mental health issues. So to know that you can do that as well. But J-Lo, how can you advocate for social justice in your everyday life? Here are a few tips. I know we're running out of time, so I'll go through them briefly. One is to know that your voice can make a difference. Dr. Parham mentioned my talk with Bill O'Reilly, and I'll talk about that at the end. But to know that you are an expert and that you have so much that you can say. To use media as an educational tool. There's a class somewhere in the Midwest on Beyonce, and that's what the class is called. I want to teach Beyonce 101. But if I'm not able to, how can I integrate some of those conversations into my classrooms? And when we talk about multicultural competence, to know that it's not just that one diversity class that you take at the end of your careers and within your programs, but that it should be integrated into every single class. So in your personality development class, they should talk about intersectional identities. In your histories and systems class, they should talk about multiculturalism. How can you promote that so that we aren't complacent with having this multicultural afterthought? Start early. Talk to your kids from an early age at age-appropriate ways. This is a book on microaggressions towards children, and I don't get any credit or anything for it, but it's one that can help kids to learn from an early age that these are things that people do that hurt others, and maybe we need to be more mindful. Maybe if a kid learned from an early age that saying certain things can hurt others' feelings, that maybe as adults they'll know not to say those things. And maybe we need to talk about issues related to race and gender and sexual orientation from an early age so that we can teach this next generation to be good allies if they are allies, if they are people with those privileged identities, and that we could teach people who might have some of those marginalized identities that they are to be celebrated, that they're normalized. And so this is something that we can focus on as well. You are an expert, write about it, write op-eds. I've written for places like the New York Times or even the American Psychological Association, sometimes solicited, sometimes unsolicited. I said, I have something I have to say. Use your networks. Ask people if there are opportunities for you to write. There used to be such a fear of mental health practitioners being public because of boundary issues and that sort of thing. But the truth is that we live in a different world now, that students are going to find you or clients are going to find you no matter what. So might as well have them find you and have a good article attached to it. Because this is the world we live in, and maybe having an article can help a client to feel more comfortable with you. Maybe having an article can help a client to realize that this is a person who is really interested in talking about social justice. Maybe I can feel safe in bringing that up, especially if they might not have thought that you would be a safe person to discuss those things with. Educate through social media. I say this with a caveat because I know that it can be exhausting to do work through social media, but sometimes we need to invest in the people that we care enough about, that to have conversations on things that maybe they don't have education or access to education about, to know that it's important for you to pick your battles so that you're not fighting with every single person on Facebook, and also to know that it's okay to cut off relationships either temporarily or permanently because you have different values from someone or they're causing you a significant amount of distress. We talk so much about how it's important for people to forgive their families and to try to, or just don't let politics interfere in your relationships. But guess what? Politics is personal. Personal is political. And that if people are abusing you in ways that make you feel that you are unheard or invalid, then that might be a relationship that you might need to revisit. In the same way that if we know a person has been abused by a spouse or a parent, we need to know that if a person is abused by a family member who makes them feel inferior or less than, that maybe that might be a relationship they need to revisit. Build genuine relationships with people. My philosophy is that when you are kind to people, that they can be kind back to you. And even when you're kind to people and they're not kind back to you, at least you've offered them some kindness. So it really isn't a lose-lose situation. It's something that's a win-win. Build genuine relationships that people who are kind to others are people that others want to uplift. And people who are humble are people that others want to uplift as well. Uplift each other when people are doing great things, tell others about it. We oftentimes don't want to share our own accomplishments because we don't want to come off as being narcissistic or as being boastful. And if that's the case, then have others to share your accomplishments for you. Have your friends, your loved ones, your partners to brag about you for you because it might be difficult for you to do yourself. And the last thing I'm going to say is to practice self-care. I think it's so difficult for us to take care of others when we are not taking care of ourselves. I know that for me, it took me a little while to recover from this November 8th, November 9th, and I went through stages of grief. I was sad, I was angry, I was in denial, I was and am still bargaining. Maybe the Electoral College will not vote for him. But that's part of the process. And to take care of yourself, whether it be through yoga or cooking or just spending time with friends, these are ways that we can make sure that we are our best selves so that we can be our best healers. And finally, I just want to share my one last story, and it's on the O'Reilly factor. And one story I want to leave you with in hopes that it might encourage you to recognize that you really can make a difference. So the year was 2007, and the O'Reilly factor contacted me because a few days prior, someone had informed me that the TV show that was popular at the time, Desperate Housewives, had made a disparaging comment about Filipino medical schools. So Terry Hatcher's character, who was potentially going through menopause, her doctor told her this, and Terry Hatcher's character said, can I check your degree to make sure you didn't go to some medical school in the Philippines? So it's just like a joke, meant to be lighthearted. But when you come from a community that is hardly ever mentioned in the media, any of these negative stereotypes can be hurtful and impactful. So we wrote a petition to ABC Studios. Keep in mind, this is before social media blew up. This was 2007. And so we had to do email forwards. Do you remember that? Email forwards, and you forwarded it 1,000 times, so it would say like forward, forward, forward. So we did that, and the petition is cited as being one of the fastest growing online petitions during that time. Within the first day, there were 10,000 people that signed the petition. By the end of 3 days, there was 90,000 people that signed the petition. So the O'Reilly Factor picked up on this, and it must have been a slow news day. So they invited me to come speak to Bill O'Reilly on the show. So I went, and after I had my panic attack and talked to friends about it, I went to the show, and I get there, and they escort me to the waiting room, or the green room. So as I'm sitting in the green room, I'm there by myself, and the person on the segment after me is the newly crowned Miss America. So it was a really slow news day. So I'm there, and I'm talking to Miss America, and she has a whole crowd of people that are there with her. And one of the people on her team starts a conversation with me, and he says, "Oh, so what are you doing here?" And I explain the situation, and he says, "So what organization are you from?" And at the time, I really was not with any organization. I was on internship, to be truthful. So I was not part of any organization. And I said, "No, no one. It's just me." And he looked at me, and he said, "Wow, I guess it's true what they say. One person really can make a difference." So I leave that with you because I know that it's hard to recognize, especially in a time like now, that your voice can make a difference. But I want to reassure you that it can. And whether your voice is a loud one that gets you into trouble sometimes, or even if your voice is a soft one, that people might not even know that you're speaking, but they know that we know that you're doing that work in different ways, that's all helpful. And I'll say this one last time, I can't promise you that it'll get better, but I can promise you that we can get through this together. So thank you so much. I appreciate being here, and thank you to Dr. Parham and to the staff for being here. Thank you.
I told you. Give it up, Kevin and Doug. So first things first. Kevin, let me invite you to stand for me. Part of being an elder in this profession is you get to appeal to the conscience of young people who read your books and other stuff. But I thank him for taking time out of his day and schedule and busy itinerary to come all the way to California, even back home, to be with us. And to do it, by the way, on the cheap, because we're like, this is UC, and we have a conference and better and no big budgets, and I need you to come and bring some wisdom and whatever. Was he pretty phenomenal today? Yeah? But my colleagues in UC decided that, nah, we can't quite roll like that. So in here is a card, and the card just has a message from us, and there is a small honorarium in here that we want you to have, just to say thank you, and to let you know how much we appreciate all the work you've done. This is just pretty doggone phenomenal, yeah? Right? Give me the snap. All right. We're off to a good start, yeah? Okay, so a couple of announcements. Let me do some housekeeping piece and then a final thought for closing the morning. One, lunch is going to be right through our back doors. It's outside in the bamboo pavilion, which is kind of the outdoor terrace there, and you'll see a tent over it just in case it has already started sprinkling, which we're supposed to get some massive rain here in Southern California. I know, how dare it rain in Southern California? Like, what's up with that? Okay, our first breakout sessions are supposed to start at 12:50, right? Now, we're gonna modify the calendar a little bit. So let me tell you about that. But before I do, those who are going to the Torrey Pine room, that's located on the 3rd floor of the hotel, not the 2nd floor as noted in the program. So make a note in your program that Torrey Pine is on the 3rd floor, not the 2nd floor. Now, schedule modifications. So our skill building workshops that are supposed to start at 12:50 will start at 1:05. So we're backing everything up 15 minutes. So skill building workshops 1 to 5. Panel discussions, right, 1 to 6, that are supposed to start, right, Tuesday will start at 3:05. So it'll go 3:05 to 4:05. Our break will start at 4:05 to 4:25. Our Let's Talk sessions, 1 to 5, will start at 4:25 to 6:15. And then the networking reception will back up just 15 minutes like everything else to 6:15. Is that cool? Yes. All right, now, we have not allowed an hour and a half for lunch, whatever. We are serving you lunch outside. But we have lots of food for your soul. We have food for your mind, food for your hearts, right? So, right, eat, but eat quickly. And there are 4 lines in the space that we're going to get to, so we'll do that. Now, as a final word, I want to draw really just on some energy that Kevin just gave us about all the strategies that you can employ about how you trump hate in the world. And I want us to be clear, and I've tried to be clear in even the messages I've sent out to our campus and across the UC system as Vice Chancellor. I don't want you to get it twisted that because you happen to vote for a political party or not, that there's something wrong about that. I think everybody's right for political ideology should be respected. What I do want you to be clear and want you to hear from Kevin's voice here is that it isn't political ideology that people are reeling against. It is the assault on people's humanity that we are reeling against. And so, as you think about gathering momentum about that, irrespective of what political party you embrace or don't embrace, we can always find a way, right, to find hope in the midst of despair, courage in the face of fear. We can always find a way, right, to love our way through the darkness, right, of some of the stuff that's going on in life. And even for those folk who feel more emboldened now to step up, I agree with Kevin, it isn't new. It's just now out in public. Right? Dr. King was clear when he did the civil rights movements back in the day that he would bring America face to face with herself in the mirror, which is what you saw with the civil rights marches. America is now coming face to face with herself in the mirror. And as the healers in the world, it is our job to try to help a nation heal. We have not just clients, but nations that are in need of healing. We have campuses that are in need of healing. But there aren't going to be very many good seats in the mezzanine on the sidelines. We need everybody to get out and to get involved. The Honorable Marcus Garvey was clear. He said, chance never satisfies the hope of suffering people. It's only through hard work, persistence, and self-reliance by which the oppressed ever realize the light of their own freedom. Hard work, persistence, and self-reliance, because chance will never satisfy the hope of a suffering people. With that, you are dismissed for lunch. Thank you for being here this morning. One more time, Kevin the Dog.